In my opinion, the subject that we talk about tonight is the most important subject, not just in religion, but in life itself, because the subject is forgiveness. And what I have to say is nothing new. You've heard me say it many times before. But it's something that I need to keep reminding myself of, because if I don't, it is so easy to live an unforgiving life. And an unforgiving life is a life without peace. It's a life without God, a life without love. Because above all else, love is forgiving. When a couple comes in to get married, I will often tell them that they're poorly educated, have no morals, and don't know the meaning of the word forgiveness. They're not fit for adult life, much less for marriage. Strangely enough, they often take offense at my saying that. So I say, okay, let's start with the simplest. You don't know the meaning of the word forgiveness, do you? Because you see, their answer is everybody knows that. I mean, forgiveness means, to forgive. It's like, when you forgive somebody. But of course, everybody who has studied the English language knows you cannot define a word by using that word. What does it mean to forgive? It's so simple. We all know that. We use the word. We use the word often. But what I suggest to you is that the concept of forgiveness, the idea that most of us grew up with, really stinks. Stinks to high heaven. See if this sounds familiar. Forgiveness looks like this. We start out with the fact that you offended me. But since I'm such a nice guy, I'm going to let you off the hook. And I'm not going to hold it against you. I'll forget it this time. But don't ever let it happen again. That's not forgiveness. That stinks. Because what that is saying is, you offended me. You bum, you offended me. I have now established myself as the innocent and injured party. I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy. That's not forgiveness. That's rubbing your nose in it. Look what you did to me. How dare you? And yet we go through life doing that to each other, and we think wonders what we are, because look how forgiving we are. And all we're doing is rubbing people's noses in it. Again, you've heard me use the example of the woman who came to me one day and said, Father, I can't believe it. After 21 years of marriage, without any cause whatsoever, my husband walked out on me. I don't understand it. And she said, in the first year of our marriage, he was unfaithful to me, and I forgave him. And now he does this to me. Well, we didn't have to talk too long before I found out. She forgave him once a month for 21 years. She brought that up. Look what you did. But I'm forgetting about it. I forgive. Look how neat I am. Look how good I am, you bum. That's not forgiveness. That's ugly. That's mean. That's rotten. And yet so many of us will pass that off as forgiveness. What is forgiveness then, if that's what it's not? I believe that genuine forgiveness, a genuinely forgiving spirit, begins with a true ownership of this statement. Nobody has ever deliberately set out to hurt me. Can you own that? Nobody has ever deliberately set out to hurt me. And usually when you say that, you can see it in people's faces. Well, that's not true. I mean, look what so-and-so did, and look what so-and-so did, and look what so-and-so did. We remember all of the times we've been hurt. And what we find is that we're looking at it as deliberate. And in most people's minds, there is no other way of looking at it. I was hurt, it must have been deliberate. I mean, what other reason could you possibly give for that person saying that? Forgiveness, I think, starts with this. Number one, everybody in this world is hurting. And sometimes their hurts are so deep, even they don't know what they are. And number two, most offenses are taken, not given. And all I have to do is look again. Let's start with that one. Look again. You know, in its root meaning, that's what the word respect means. Look again. Respect. Look again. And that's what I think is the basis of Christian love, to look again. To look again at this person standing before me that I think hurt me. To look again at you and your needs and your hurt. And to see what it is you're crying out for. Because, you know, most of us are like people with a toothache. And if you've ever had a really severe toothache, you know there's only one thing in life you want, and that's a dentist. Somebody to make it better. And we go through life saying, are you my dentist? Can you take away this pain, this isolation, this loneliness, this brokenness? Can you take away my sin? Can you take away this hurt that I have? And also, if you've ever had a toothache, a real toothache, you know, until you find your dentist, don't cross me. Because, see, I'm hurting. You cross me, I'll put your lights out. Because, see, I'm hurting. I don't mean to hurt anybody. It's just don't bug me. Because I'm hurting. And aren't we all? We need to look again. Again, it's a very simple example. I get a couple in who's planning marriage. And you probably haven't noticed this, but it's one of my deepest, darkest secrets. I love to hear the sound of my voice. I will talk and talk and talk. Like I say, I'm sure you haven't noticed that yet, but it's true. And here's some poor guy who got up at 5:30 in the morning, put in a full 8 hours work, has to drive all the way down from St. Louis to St. Genevieve. He said it's only 60 miles, but at the end of a full day's work and coming down in the evening, all you can think of is, let's get this over with so I can go home and go to sleep. And so while I'm droning on and on in my monotone, this poor guy yawns. Now, I am capable of coming unglued about that yawn. Because what's that yawn telling me? That yawn is telling me you're boring me, Father. That yawn is telling me you don't know what you're talking about, Father. That yawn is telling me, why don't you shut up and get this over with? And who do you think you are to be talking to me that way? Hey, the poor guy is just tired, that's all. But you see how easy it is to interpret that? You see how easy it is to see that as an insult, and you think, oh, that's ridiculous. Is it? Is it? Take a look at the last time you were hurt and see if maybe you look again. There isn't another way of looking at it. That's not to say that sometimes the guy isn't telling me that. Shut up, you're boring me, you don't know what you're talking about, let's get this over with. Okay. But most of the time that's not the case. He's just tired, that's all. Look again. Most hurt is in the way it's taken, not in the way it's given. And then to understand that you're hurting too. What is it that we're all looking for? We're looking to know that we count. We're looking to know that we mean something. We look to know that we are loved. We all want that. Again, look at the silly arguments we mostly married couples get into because they're so close to each other. You leave the cap off the toothpaste. Now there is genuinely an unforgivable sin, right? Because we all know that you're supposed to put the cap back on the toothpaste after you use it. And by the way, squeeze it at the bottom, not in the middle. Now who would ever argue? Who would ever fight? Who would ever get hurt over some silly little thing like that? Every one of us is capable of it. Because that's not the issue. The issue is, look, I give, and I give, and I give, and all I ask out of life is that you put the cap back on the toothpaste tube, and that's asking too much. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm angry. Do we say that to each other? Heck no. Suddenly this little plastic cap becomes the end-all and be-all of life. And we kid ourselves by saying, and this is all I ask. Who are you kidding? That is not all you ask. But right now, that happens to be the focus of your attention. So it seems like that's all you ask. And here is this other person who doesn't care enough about you to go along with such a small request. Hey, that's worth being heard about. But which of us walks into the bathroom and says, well, I think I'll show her I don't love her. I'm going to put the cap of the toothpaste over here. That'll teach her. I bet that's going to hurt. And see, when you put it that way, you think, oh, nobody does that. But when you walk in and find it sitting over there, your first reaction is, that was intentional. He knows, she knows how I hate that. Oh, boy. You know, when we start Mass and we say, let us call to mind our sinfulness, and then we go into some Lord have mercy or some I confess, you know what we really ought to do? We really ought to say, let's call to mind our sinfulness. Okay, now let's laugh. Because we're crazy. We are totally humorous people. When we call to mind our sinfulness, we should just put our heads back and roar. Because we're nuts. And that's part of what it means. Because you see, if we can laugh at ourselves, what we've begun to do is put our sinfulness, our pettiness, our smallness into perspective. And when we pull back and look at it, it is genuinely funny. However, when we're in the middle of it, it is anything but funny. Because when we're in the middle of it, we are feeling, again, alone, isolated, unloved. And you think, oh, well, nobody thinks that. No, we don't think that. That's just a gut reaction. That's why I think one of the steps to forgiveness is to note the vehemence of your reaction. If your reaction to things in life is totally out of keeping with the size of the thing that happened, something comes into play that is a truism that we all do well to remember. And it goes simply like this: I am never upset about what I seem to be upset about. Never. I am not upset about this toothpaste cap. I'm not upset about where you squeezed the tube. I'm not upset about this, that, or the other thing. I'm upset about something else. And that's why I find what you're doing so hard to swallow. That's why I find what you're doing so hard to forgive. And most of us find it difficult to forgive one very important thing. We find it difficult to forgive life itself. We find it difficult to forgive what life does to us, the vagaries, the crazy things that happen. We find it difficult to accept the weird roll of the dice, the weird hand that is dealt us in this game of life. And right behind that, we find it extremely difficult to forgive ourselves. Because we got that great little line, yeah, but I should have known better. Well, you're right. You should have known better. But evidently at that moment you didn't. Evidently at that moment you couldn't see your weakness, your sinfulness. To learn to accept ourselves and to learn to accept everybody around us as just trying to do the best they can with life. The key to that, look again. Look again at yourself. Look again at others. And watch out. Watch out for the worst, ugliest, meanest tyrant in life. It's a very simple little word called should. The tyranny of the should. I should have known better. You should have known better. We should have known better. Life should have been better to us. This should not have happened. You should not have done that. All those shoulds. Shoulds are really neat in the objective order. The only problem with the objective world is that nobody has an address there. Nobody lives there. We all live in a very subjective world, and we're very subject to the here and now needs, the here and now demands, the here and now fears, the here and now worries of life. To forgive, if we were going to use one word synonym, I would use the word accept. Accept that I'm doing the best I can with what I got. You're doing the best you can with what you've got. And in the process, we're going to walk on each other. We're going to hurt each other. Or rather, we're going to be hurt. In the process, we're going to miss the word should by a whole wide margin. We're just going to do what we can, not what we ought to. And that's life. And that's what it means to be human. Nobody has ever deliberately set out to hurt me. They saw some good in it. They saw some reason why they should do what they were doing. Maybe it was to get a laugh. Maybe it was to prove that they're better than I am. Maybe it was to prove to themselves that they're okay. Maybe it was just to get a little attention. Maybe it was to try to feel as though they count for something. Let's not take that personally. If as you leave here tonight you find somebody lying out on the steps in front of church and they're having a heart attack, and you stand over them and scream, "Stop that! You shouldn't be doing that. This shouldn't be happening." You think that person is a nut. You don't tell somebody having a heart attack to stop it. Well, we all have a heart attack daily. And that heart attack is an attack of loneliness, an attack of the pain that we're feeling, an attack of loneliness, an attack of being worthless, of not counting for anything. That's a genuine heart attack. And when we stand there and yell at each other, "You shouldn't do that," it's almost the same as somebody who's having a physical heart attack. What that person needs is understanding. What that person needs is acceptance, not some more shoulds. Acceptance. I know a whole bunch of people that we probably don't agree on any two things in life, and yet I like them. I respect them, usually. But every now and then, I forget to focus on how much I like them and how much I respect them, and I focus on how much we differ. Boy, do I get hurt then. Because you see, then they're challenging my mind, they're challenging my intention, they're challenging my everything. Why do you want to live like that? That's silly to put yourself in that prison. No, we're all just trying to get through this life the best way we know how. Maybe there are some sickies in this world, but I suggest to you, if you know one of them, that's a lot. I don't know any of them. And yet, everybody who crosses me for that moment is all too frequently viewed as one of those people out to get me. Just as a closing thought, comes from my great theology book, the comic strips. Ziggy's psychiatrist says to him, "Don't you think that if the world indeed were out to get you, it would have gotten you by now?" There's a lot of truth in that. All these people around you were out to get you, they'd have done it by now. They're not. They're doing the best they can, and so are you. Accept that. That's forgiveness. That's the most important step to peace, and the most important step to love.
The gospel for today is John chapter 10, verses 31 to 42.
Perhaps one of the tragedies of the modern era is that we are losing a sense of irony, a sense of being able to see what is real behind what we're faced with. We have become so obsessed with proving things. We've been obsessed with physical evidence that very often we don't see what's really going on. And that's sad, because it's in irony that we find God. We can look at each other and we can see what the other does, and we can take that at face value. That's how so many feelings get hurt. Somebody says something just not even thinking, and we get our feelings hurt and we begin to think that they're out to get us. And that's sad, because that's not the case. When was the last time you deliberately set out to rip somebody apart? Deliberately, right to their face, set out to really get them? We don't do that. We're not that kind of people. But then think the last time you felt somebody did that to you. If you don't do that, why do you think that they do? And it's not just in human beings, it's in everything. It's in nature. It's all around us. The hand of God. As the one man says, you can't separate God from his works. Just as you can't separate a song from a singer's voice, God sings creation. You can't separate a dance from the dancer. God dances creation. But we can't see it. Maybe it's because we're not looking deep enough. Maybe it's because we're not looking at what's really going on. Maybe we're just too taken up with what meets the eye. I hear a lot of people in the face of a lot of things saying, why? Why is God allowing this? Why is God doing this? Why is a very frustrating question. It's an attempt to find some reason, some proof even. Maybe a better question is, what's going on here? Not what did you say, but what's going on here. Not what happened, but what's really going on here. And when we really get into that, what we're going to find is a whole lot of hurt. There's a lot of hurt sitting in this church right now. Hurts from the past, hurts from the way we were brought up, hurts from the way we feel we've been treated by life. Hurts because of our own self-esteem, our own image of ourselves. And those hurts come out in some strange ways sometimes. If all I'm listening to is your words, I'm never going to hear those hurts. If all I'm watching are your actions, I'm never going to see your need. But when I stop simply listening to words and watching actions, and I begin to see and hear you, then I can begin to love you. Because then I will see your need, I will see your hurt, and I can respond. A lot of things are going to happen today, but even more things will be going on. Let's get beyond simply what happened and find out what's going on.